So good morning again, recording this live for my students who cannot attend today's session for whatever reason, just so that they will not miss the content that is being taught, because it is new content. For the previous classes, we were looking at narrative writing. We explained what is narrative writing, what is a narrative, this is a story. We broke down the different elements of plot, basically the different parts, the walking parts of a story, and we determined that all of those walking parts are very necessary in order to have a story that entertains, and by entertains you mean to give somebody inspiration or give someone a lesson that they can give careful consideration and thought to something, or they can be amused, as in they can be inspired. So today, now that we understand the elements of plot, we are going to plan a narrative, and we are going to understand the purpose for each step in the planning stage, and then we're going to establish coherence and unity in all the parts that we have planned. So today we're not going to write a story, we are planning our story. So in order for you to write a story, the first thing you have to realize is that the writing process that we will have learned earlier in the terms, when we did the first module, the writing process applies to this stage as well. So the writing process requires us to brainstorm, organize, and categorize our information. So when you brainstorm, remember, you organize, categorize, and you plan your information in an orderly fashion. In our previous note, we learned that the storyline goes in a curve like this, right? So it goes in a curve like that. So this is the beginning of the story, and this will be the end of the story, and this will be the part of the story. You know, when you're planning a story, most people believe that you have to start once upon a time. You do not start at the beginning of a story. Because if you start at the beginning of the story, who knows the end of the story? That is why we always say that God is the ultimate creator, He is the ultimate designer and architect, because He knows our story. Before we were formed in the womb, it says that He knows our story. So if the creator, the narrator, the one who is making the story, the one who is creating the character, the one who is planning the events of the story, knows the end of the story, then you, as the individual writing the story, must start with the planning from the end of the story. So you, as the author of your own character's fate, will know how the character is going to end at the end of your story. So that is why when we are planning our story, we often start at the end of the story. So the first thing that we have to do is examine the stimulus. Now the stimulus is whatever prompt that is given in the examination that will tell us what is the story that we have to write. Now I'm going to start, there are 3 different types of prompt that you can get for CSEC. You can get a title. I haven't seen them give a title in a very long time, but you can give a title. So they can say, write a story with the title, The Lost Boy. And you have to create a story with that. Sometimes they may give you a line out of the story. So they will say, from that moment on, Susie knew that she will never go down the street alone again. And you'll have to write a story about that. And the third prompt is a picture. So they will say, look at this picture and create a story from the picture. Today, I'm going to show you how to plan a story when you are given a picture prompt. And the reason why I want to start with a picture prompt is that most times, visual helps people create a story in their mind better than just a word or a title. So I'm going to start with what may be considered the most easy prompt, but it is a very complex, prompt. Because when you look at the story, I say step 1, examine the stimulus. So when you look at the picture that is here, the first thing that we have to do is start picking out description. Because description is what is going to show that this picture that you have here in front of you is reflected in your story. You have to show that this picture is reflected in your story. Some of the things that we're going to look at in the picture would be the background. So the background will give you an idea of the setting. So with the background, you can see that there is greenery in the background, so it is outdoors. So the setting must be outdoors at some point in time. You will notice that there are two characters there, two girls, one with short hair and one with cornrowed hair. One is wearing a skirt and a floral top, and the other is wearing a wrap and a top. They both have two boats, and they are smiling. If you look, one is bare feet, and the other one you can assume is also bare feet, but that will be up to us to determine. So here we have two boats, well, four boats, two for each girl, and the two girls are standing there, broad smiles on their faces, outdoors. So then when we examine the stimulus and we look at the description that we need to include, this will then give us a theme that we can possibly come up with. Now remember, the theme is a thought, so it comes first. Whenever you're writing a story, after you've established what is your stimulus, the next thing you have to come up with is your theme. So from this picture, what is a theme that you can come up with? I will say humility. Right? And the reason why I choose humility is, if you look at these girls, they're bare feet, they are farming, you know, you can tell that there are not many technology and so on around there, because you don't see any buildings, you don't see any wires, you don't see anything that will indicate that they are in an industrial or a developed area. So I think community and humility are two good themes that we can use. So remember, I told you about my accident this morning. So I would say a theme would be community, because the two girls are there, they do not look related. Well, they don't share similar features as far as I can see, and they look very similar in age. So unless they are twins who have very different features, I can say that they are somewhat friends or neighbors or relatives, not sisters. So I choose community and humility as my theme. You notice I have not said anything about my title as yet. The title is actually the last thing that you're going to choose in your story. And usually CSEC does a very good job at testing your ability to come up with titles, when they will give you a story without a title and then ask you what would be an appropriate title. Right? And usually the best titles are titles that pick out one pertinent aspect of the story. Maybe it was a phrase that you repeated in the story, or maybe it was a moment of clarity for the character in the story. But usually when you incorporate some type of phrase or description or some literary aspect of the story in the title, that is when your title is more significant. Okay, so we're not going to focus on the title for now, but we're going to focus on all these other things. So the theme that we have decided is community and humility. So we have established our theme. The next step is to comprise a resolution, a moral or lesson. So looking at this picture, what can be a lesson that these girls can learn? Or what can be a lesson that these two characters can help our audience extract? You had like in life, you have to be independent. Okay, so that could be another theme, the independent. So your moral is in life is hard, but with a sense of ambition and support, from those who care, we can achieve great things. That's a good lesson there. Right? So looking at these two girls tying out their goals, we have decided that the resolution of the lesson that we want to teach the audience is that life is hard. There will be struggles, but with a sense of ambition, that sense of independence, that do it, I can do it attitude, right? That we can overcome hard things, and it's even better when you have somebody who is there to support you or who is going through the struggle with you. And I think that's a very good thing. Thank you very much, Auntie. Being the only student here, as you're always the only one. Alright, so I would like you to identify a conflict that will be needed to bring about this lesson. So remember, conflict is man versus man, man versus nature, man versus self. What do you think will be a conflict that will show ambition, support, hard work? A conflict. Look, right now we're experiencing some very hot weather. Farmers have to get water tanks and so on, because even though this is the rainy season, crops are still getting very little water.
In this picture, with the conflict, like how they have so much animal, and the place the ground looking dry.
Yes, the ground
is looking dry. It will be rough for them to get place to tie up the
right. Okay, so the conflict will be man versus nature. So the conflict will be man versus nature. So we have decided that the conflict that we're having is man versus nature, and we're going to look at drought. Right? So drought. They can't find anywhere to tie their animals. Right? So Gamisha, thank you for coming. We're just going through the process of planning our narratives. For the last two classes, we know that we look at what is a narrative, we look at the elements of plot that make up the narrative. Today we are looking at how we plan using those different elements of plot. Right? So here I have the objectives. We're going to plan our narrative, and we're going to understand the purpose for each step. So why do we brainstorm, organize, and categorize the information accordingly? Right? So we already have the categories that we need to fill, which will be the elements of plot. And now we are looking at the organization of the information so that we can establish coherence and unity in all of these parts. Now I was telling Anto that when you think of a story, you think a story begins once upon a time. But when you are the author, just like the Bible says, before we were formed in the womb. Hello. Hello. I was just going to recap. So just as the Bible was saying, before we were even formed in the womb, God already knows our story, right? Because He is the divine author and the creator. So if you are the creator of a story, you are the God of the character that you are creating in this world on a page. It means that you're supposed to already know how the story ends. You're not supposed to start, and as you write along the story, you figure it out as you go along. That's for the character to do. That's what we are doing in life, but God already knows when we're going to take that final breath and what will be our story's end. So you have to think of it like that. That in your creation of your story, you are the author. You know the end of the story. So that is why when we are planning a story, we do not start at the beginning of the plot line with the exposition. We actually start at the end of the story with the resolution. Right? Which is the moral of the theme. So here are the steps. I explained that for CSEF, there are 3 different types of stimulus that you can get, or prompts. Stimuli or prompt that you can get. One is a title for a story. So they may give you the title of the story, write a story on the lost road. It's what's wrong there, you have to get, you know.
Okay.
Inside the office, just ask Miss Lenny to hand it to you, please. So for the title, you will have to create a story where that title is impactful. I don't want to use the title prompt as yet because the title is the last thing that you're going to create in the story. So using a title as a prompt when you're now beginning would be too difficult for you to understand. Using a line in the story is another way. So they may say, Susie decided that from that day forth she was not going to walk down the street alone. Write a story on what Susie encountered. I don't want to use that either because that requires for you to already know what are the moving parts of the story, etc. So for me, the best thing to start with is the picture prompt because it allows you to visualize what you would want in the story. So here we have our picture prompt, page 157. As we looked at the picture, we have to, step 1, examine the stimulus. So the stimulus would be the picture, the prompt. And as we were looking at the description, we saw green in the background. So naturally the setting is outdoors. Alright, so the setting will have to be outdoors at some point in time. The next thing we established were the characters. We saw 2 girls, one in a floral top and a pretty colored skirt. The other one is in a wrap and a shirt, and she is bare feet. And then we see 4 goats, and the 2 girls are holding the goats. If you look on the ground, you see a lot of brown leaves and dry grass. So from this description, our story must include this setting and this description. Whenever you're writing your story, whoever is reading the story must be able to visualize this picture without seeing this picture, based on how you describe the setting and the events in your story. So that is step 1. So we examine the stimulus. After we examine the stimulus, the next thing we do is come up with our theme. Right? So we establish our theme or the thought. So looking at this picture, a good theme that we can get out of this and to give community, humility, and independence. Okay? Now remember, our themes are usually steeped in some sort of virtue or vice or some sort of ideology. Now if you know what is an ideology, it is an idea of how to live life. Right? So an idea of how to live life. And most of our ideas on how to live life we can get from Sunday school. So I like to use the Bible, 1, because it is one of the foundational texts that we all can relate to. And it was one of the foundational ideologies that we can all relate to. So if you're talking about a book, I can't come and talk about Vampire Diaries because I don't think many of you here would have read Vampire Diaries. But Gavisha, you would have read Vampire Diaries? Right. So you see, Gavisha haven't even read that. So I don't think that there is a book in here that we would have all read and agreed on, other than maybe the Bible. So I like to use that as a benchmark. So when you look at community, humility, independence, I then look at what would be the moral or the lesson or the resolution, the resolution that we can get out of these things. And Angel suggests when you look at the picture, she says life is hard, but with a sense of ambition and support from those who care, we can achieve great things. Right? So she is looking at the fact that these 2 girls are probably friends in the community. And as you can see, they are bare feet, they are farming, so they can see that they are in rural communities. It's not an urban community. You can tell it's not urban because there are no buildings in the background. You're not seeing any lampposts, you're not seeing any buildings, you're not seeing any water meter, no pipelines. It's just nature in the background. So with a sense of community, no matter how humble your beginnings are, if you work hard, then you can overcome and you can have great things. So that is a lesson that Auntie wants us to learn from this picture in her story. If you have any other thing that you want to contribute, you can contribute, or we'll go along with that one. Yes? Yes? Okay, good. So step 4, identify a conflict that is needed to bring about the lesson. Now, as you notice, we are walking backwards. We are still walking backwards. So from our lesson, we have to establish what will be the problem. Remember, I said this is the resolution. So remember the resolution, I tell you this would be the answer to the problem. So now that we know the resolution, what is the problem? We're going to establish the problem. So she said, if you look at the background, it is very dry. So her conflict is man versus nature, and there is going to be a drought. Okay? So there's going to be a drought. Now from the drought, that does not say what is going to be the specific crisis that they're going to go through. So now we're going to establish the action that this drought is going to be focused around. So the first thing we're going to establish first is what would be the crisis. What would be the major problem? The major problem is they cannot find any way to feed the goats. Yes, that's what Auntie said. So goats are not fed. So what can be the actions? So here we have rising action. What can be some of the actions that lead up to that? Remember, when you're writing your action, you have to have a good, bad balance. We call this the good, bad technique. It keeps our readers in suspense and it helps to build up the feeling. So let's start off with the good. What would be a good?
You could say like it have a specific place.
Right. So the girls tie out goats. You know, in the instruments when we said tie out, you know what is the word for tie out? Tether. You know this word tether? Yeah, tether. So the girls tether the animals. You don't have to use it, you could say tie out, I know what tie out means. But I'm just letting you know what is the word in case. Right. So girls tether animals in one, let's say, flourishing area.
It's something you could just tie them and cut, like trees for them.
Okay. So when the girls tie them in a flourishing area, what happens to this flourishing area when they're being tied there too often? Area begins to get sparse due to low rainfall. Right? Then, what would be a good thing as you say, until they hut. So girls decide to cut grass for animals to feed. But then what happened? What happened? Something bad happened.
It will say, I think I said something about the villagers.
Okay, let's say what the neighbors don't want them to come and cut their trees anymore.
Yeah.
So other villagers compete for grass cutting. What then?
You have to move.
Now remember, you only need about five events because it is a short story. And when you're writing this, you're not going to write it in a sentence like this,
No.
Because for each sentence, you're going to have to write what your senses feel, what your senses pick up, and what your emotions feel. For every single action, you're going to have to write what your senses pick up. Either you see plenty grass, and then you have to say how you feel about that. And then when you say the area begins to get sparse, you have to describe what the sparseness is. They were looking around, they were just twigs, the leaves were dry. They were just twigs, the leaves were dry, the ground was hard, and then you have to say how you feel about that. So for every action, you have to describe it with your senses, as many senses as you feel necessary. So maybe 3 out of the senses that you
have.
Right, so let's do that. So the other villagers come feed for the grass. So the girls release the animals from the area. So they release the animals from the area. Right? Because now we are at the crisis. The goats are not fed. But guess what? The goats run off. Right? So goats run off. And the 2 girls look for them. So that's a good thing. But what's a bad thing? Can't find them. So they looked for hours. Now, when you're writing a short story, the action must take place in 24 hours. You can give background information about how long you've been dealing with this drought and so on, but the action must take place in 24 hours. So you can't say, well, they wake up and went back to sleep or whatever. You can use memories. We call that flashback. Right? So you can use memories to relate to times past. But the story setting and action must happen within 24 hours. It can't go on further than that. If it goes on further than that, then you need a new chapter. And then a short story is not a chapter book. Right? So when you have a chapter book, you could have days and days and days. When you want to talk about years, you have to have a saga. So one book will be 1 year, another book will be another year, another book will be another year. Right? Even when you look at Babysitter's Club and those sort of Nancy Drew books and so, you notice it's one summer. Each book is just a different episode. It's a different day within the same setting, which is summer. We call those episodic texts. But when you have a book where day after day, day after day, day after day is passed, it is a chapter book, like those episodic books.
Series.
Right, a series. The chapters represent a new day, a new day. But when you're talking about years now, like if you look at Twilight and those books, those are sagas. Like Lord of the Rings, those are sagas. So they go on maybe a month after, a Percy Jackson. But when you're writing a short story, it is 1 day, 24 hours. So you can use memory to flash back to time, maybe 3-4 days ago, but the action must happen within 24 hours. So when the girls let go of the goat, all of this up to this point, when the girls release the goat, this is just memory. All of this in the exposition about the drought and all of that, you have to incorporate that as a memory. Right? So maybe they set out and they say, you know what, today we got to let go of those goats. And then you go back now and you start talking about the memory. About how long they've been dealing with this. We try to put in the, you understand? So the action is they look for hours for the goats. And they can't find them. But then they hear a bleating. And what do you think they do? They follow it. And what will you think they would find? And what?
And fresh grass.
And fresh grass. So the goats nowhere to find fresh food. Right? So they follow the bleating and they found the goats with water and fresh grass. And if you look at the goat belly full now. And the girls are smiling because they now have this secret spot. Where they will go and tie the goats every day where the neighbors and them don't know. So then you see where the theme of humility comes in. Instead of standing and having cuss out with the neighbors when they're fighting for grass, they say, you know what, let go. And a sense of community, do you think that they are obligated to come back and tell the neighbors they found fresh grass?
No.
No, because the neighbors weren't very nice. But they walk together and they overcome. So that is how we find the action. If I see a hole in my shoes this morning, my bra hook up on me. Well, yeah. Remember I had 2 book bags going up that hill with you. So it says to identify the actions needed. So this is our rising action. And then the falling action would simply be how they feel. You know, after they have the goals, they can probably sit and enjoy the green for a while before they head home. You know, just make it after this stressful period of looking for the goals. The girls get the opportunity to really relax and enjoy the fruits of the labor. Maybe some fruit trees, they dive a bit in the water, all of that.
Or they play with the goat.
Or they play with the goat, right? So it says choose the best characters. Now we already had the characters, which is the 2 girls. The 2 girls. You do not need to develop the neighbors because the neighbors are just a memory. But the 2 girls, you will give a little description about them maybe running, so that your reader can get an idea of how they look based on the description in the picture. The setting, we already know the setting is outdoors. You see how everything is just falling in line now? Outdoors, we know the mood is tense. Tension and frustration. And then the mood changes from tension and frustration to relief and excitement. So we've already chosen our setting, we finalize the changes in mood, and now we're going to replay the story to see if it makes sense beginning to end. So now that we walk backwards, we're going to move forward now. So once upon a time, right, there were 2 girls who used to tether their animals in a flourishing area. But then there was a time of low rainfall, and the area began to get sparse due to this low rainfall and this period of drought. The girls decided, in order to feed the goats that cannot get grass, they will cut grass to feed the animals. But then the other villagers started competing for the grass for their animals as well, and would often complain when the girls go to different pieces of land to cut grass for their animals. The girls got frustrated and they decided that they are going to release the animals for the animals to find food wherever they can. But on the moment they released the animals, because the goats were not being fed, the goats ran off and the 2 girls lost the goats. The 2 girls had to set out to look for them. They looked for hours and they couldn't find the goat, and they were about to give up until they heard a bleating. When they heard the bleating, they jumped up and they ran off in the direction of the noise, and they followed the bleating. And they followed it. You can give the description of the setting, how high they had to go over some mountain, where behind some rock they had to go, or whatever secret path they had to go. And there they found the goats by a small stream in an area filled with lush green grass, and the goats were eating merrily and happily. The girls were rejoicing, they played hand games, they bathed a little in the stream, they played with the goats, and they even picked fruits to carry back for their siblings. On the way back, nobody knew where they were coming from, but their goats were well fed and the 2 girls were very happy. And that is how we learn that sometimes life is hard, but with a sense of ambition and from support from those who care, we can overcome and achieve great things. Sound good? Seems easy? Okay, so I'm going to leave you all to go ahead and copy down all these notes. It's quite disorganized on the board because, as you know, there's only a small board. But write out these steps separately from how we write out the plan. And if you need to elaborate on the prompts that are given to help you, elaborate on the prompts so that you can understand the story in your own special way. Right? So put in what you need to put in. Now this is not the story. This is just the outline. When we come next class, you're going to have to start doing this from the front now to the back. As in we're going to have to develop the characters. How do we describe characters? We have to give them things like names and personality. Right? So one of the girls can be what? Usually when you have two characters, you would find that those two characters, they actually complement each other. You never find two characters who are the same being friends. Never. That's why you call one supporting character. It is because one character always fills the void of the other character. So one of the girls can be very upbeat and positive. She always believes that we'll figure it out and come up with a plan. And the other one will always be pessimistic. Oh, I can't do it. I won't be able to. You understand? So that is how they complement each other. So when this one is a little too excited, that one will be the one to say, well, no, you know, we have to go and cut the grass. We can't stay here all day, because that is her natural demeanor, to always be focused on the task at hand. But when she now is depressed and saying, well, we're never going to get grass and the goats are going to die, the other character will be the more optimistic one who will say, don't worry, I have an idea. Let's let go the goats. And this is how the good-bad technique works out with your character, because where the good happens, the character who is very positive will need to be, she will need to get chastened. So yes, we cut grass here, but you can't go into people's fence to cut too much of the grass. You just have to cut what is overhanging. Right? She might be so optimistic, she might think, well, if I go in, nobody gonna have a problem with that. But the other one will say, no, you can't go in the people's land. You understand? So that is why the characters will complement each other as they go side by side with their different personality traits. So you as the author, you now have to go and look to see what would be the best characteristics, the best personality traits for each of the girls. When it comes to the setting, you'll have to find descriptive words. So we have to work on descriptive words to describe. You can't just say it was green or it was brown. You have to describe what a flourishing environment would be like. The smell. You know, you can smell when you're in a green area, an area that has a lot of grass versus an area that is concrete and tarmac and all of that. When the rain comes, the earth has a different smell than the pitch. I often find the pitch smells fresh from all the dog poo and all of that. But when the earth gets wet, it has a rich smell. And you can describe the smell as they get closer to the area.
And noise too. Noise.
The noise. You have to describe the sounds that you hear. Right? How would you represent a far off sound versus a close sound? You'll also have to describe the mood. Now remember, every time a situation happens, good or bad, you will have to come up with a description of an emotion. Remember, when we are going through our own emotions, we can sense the vibe. Without even our brain communicating through words, it communicates through feelings. When you walk in the classroom, you already get a vibe. You already know what is the mood of the people in this classroom. Without even putting words to it, we already know. And that is reality. Our body is always picking up data, you know. We're picking up smells, we're picking up sounds, we're picking up vibes, we're picking up feelings, vibrations. You can't tell if somebody is not getting along with another person in an area without them having to say anything. Right? Your body picks up that those feelings that are going on there. reading a story, how are you going to pick up the vibe? You're not in the setting. So the author is the one who has to set that vibe. Do you know that is why movies have soundtracks?
Yeah.
Do you know that is why movies have soundtracks? If you sit down and you put the TV on mute and you're just watching action, the movie is not going to be as exciting. But when you add sound, because again, sound is a frequency, it's a vibration. And that is what, when we do drama, you realize one of the elements of drama is sound. Because sound helps to create emotion. Drama is when you're acting out a story. So you don't have the narrator explaining the vibe. You have to pick it up somehow. You're not one of the characters, so you won't be able to pick it up because it's not real. You're watching people pretend something. It's not a real vibe. So when you use sound, it creates the frequency that resonates the emotion in you. So you see people who do soundtracks for movies and so, they have to do music theory. The same way people who do settings and so, have to do color theory to know what colors represent what emotions in people. People who do soundtracks as well for movies have to do.
They call them Foley, the job title.
That's what they call them?
Download what they last 2 years after they follow
They follow the bleating.
Yeah, well, after download.
They found the goat with water and fresh grass.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Right? So the sound helps to create the vibe. When we say vibe, it's short for vibration. Because without us even knowing, our brain is picking up vibrations from everywhere. There are waves and frequencies that are happening right around us right now. You see that the fact that you can feel heat but you can't see it? You can smell, sense without seeing it. There are other things that inform our psyche that we cannot see, but our body is picking up. And if you're writing a good story, it is because you're able to create that environment in the audience or in your reader using words. So when you're describing how the girls feel, you have to describe it in a way that resonates. Even that word resonates. That has to do with sound. It means it travels out. So it has to resonate in your audience, right? So as we look at the mood, you have to come up with adjectives to describe mood. When we talk about the rise in action, it's not just going to be action alone. For all of those action, you have to describe. You're not gonna it's not a news report, you know. The girl walked over, she cut the grass. She picked up the grass, she gave it to the goat eat the grass. It's not a report. You have to show. You understand? You have to say how she cut the grass. You have to describe the movement. Because words don't have movement. Whereas TV have movement because it's actors and stage. You have to then use your words to create what we call that kinesthetic imagery, that movement. So you have to find words to describe movement. And then as we go through our action, when we get to the climax now, you have to set that mood. You have to create a sense of suspense and excitement. Are they going to find the goat? Is the goat behind the rock? Right? Are they safe?
They might find the goat dead.
Or they may find it dead. What if it's just hanged because it dropped off the cliff? Right? You have to give all of this suspense in your description. And then when you get to the happy part now, it's not yes and they live happily ever after. No. You have to rejoice with the character as well so the audience can rejoice. So all of these things that we have here, this is not your final product. This is just a sketch. So as we come each class, we're going to dedicate time to creating this perfect story. But even though we all have the same storyline, everybody's story is going to be different. Thunder, yes, since last time. You know why everybody's story is going to be different?
Different experience, knowledge.
Different experience, different knowledge, different things going to resonate.
And
The word you use, money, the word you use to describe the feeling that the girl felt when they lost the goat. Maybe very different than what Tekla may describe or what Gavisha may describe. But Andrew came up with the drought as the problem. But y'all were able to come and fill in so many different things about how the girls handle the drought. So as you go through the planning stage and you come up with those words and expressions, you will see how even though you have the same storyline, everybody's expression will be different because everybody's life experiences is going to make them describe things differently. Right? You're going to use different words, different similes, different metaphors, different descriptions. Okay? So Cornelia, this is the note on the board. I've recorded the class, so you will get the benefit of it. While you're all writing the notes, I'm just going to stop the live because I'm going to teach you.